Okay, welcome. Welcome everybody to our eighth webinar of our series of webinar of the Digi4MSK project. Today we have Vatsi is our guest. His full name is a little bit difficult to pronounce, but I'm gonna try to do it correctly, which is Wacław Adamczyk. But for
Perfect.
French, it's Vatsi. Vatsi has a PhD, is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Lübeck. Currently, he has recently changed his affiliation. He holds a master's degree in physiotherapy and neurobiology and defended his PhD thesis in 2019 at the Academy of Physical Education in Katowice in Poland, where he maintains an affiliation. His doctoral research is focused on tactile acuity in both healthy individuals and patients with pain, and also, of course, spatial aspects of pain. Following his PhD, he completed postdoctoral training in the pain and exercise research Lübeck, led by Professor Kerstin Lütke, and later in the research group of Professor Robert Cohill. His research explores pain mechanisms with a particular emphasis on spatial aspects such as spatial summation, pain radiation, pain localization, and the learning processes that shape these phenomena, which are basically what we are going to talk about today. The dynamic of the webinar is going to be as the previous ones. We have prepared a series of topics to discuss. We will at some point share our screens to support the explanations with either a model or an image. And the audience, are welcome to ask questions in the chat. We'll probably wait a little bit until make these questions, but we will ask them to Vatsi, and he will try to respond. Just for you to remember that we still have open the contest ideas for both healthcare professionals and the general population about new ideas. You can come up with new ideas about how to promote self-management with patients and how you can combat in the clinical context misinformation. Yeah, and for the general population, yeah, you can share questions that you have about health or musculoskeletal pain, and from the information that you receive from your healthcare professionals, what do you have found that was missing? So share your ideas and participate in the contest. Remember that by the end of the webinar, we will have a short evaluation survey that we encourage you to complete in both Spanish and English. And remember, our next webinar will take place the 8th of May about digital monitoring of patients with musculoskeletal disorders during self-management interventions, which will be mainly in Spanish with simultaneous translation. Okay, so Batsy, welcome. Thank you for accepting this invitation. I have to say that recently, in the last months, we have had some scientific discussions, very interesting scientific discussions. And I think for those of you who are interested in the spatial aspect of pain, this is a quite interesting topic. And I think that we all can learn a lot from Vatsi and also get very useful insights for both the clinical context and the research context. So Vatsi, over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Victor, for introducing me and also inviting me to this event. I am very, very excited. And especially like on the beginning, when you reach out to me, I realized, wow, that's really cool, especially if we could do it together because we share research interests. You also studied spatial aspects of pain as well. And I think that's going to be really good. A package maybe for our participants and listeners. Okay, so I would start maybe from sharing my screen.
Yeah.
And hopefully the audio is good. If something happens, if you experience interruptions, please let me know. I will try to maybe change my location quickly. Okay, so let me see. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. So,
Yeah.
okay, I'm very, very happy because I think usually in some, probably, let's say, classes, when I talk to students after maybe first, second year, usually students are quite familiar with dimensions of pain. So it's pretty common to hear, yes, we have two dimensions of pain. We have sensory dimension of pain, which is pain intensity, and we can measure it on VAS scale. And then sometimes you can hear, yeah, but we also have affective dimension of pain, which is pain unpleasantness, and we can also measure it on the scale. And in fact, I think we have something also very important, which is spatial dimension of pain, which is where pain is located, how it is distributed, and also if the localization of pain is changing. And I'm really happy we can talk about this today because I do believe it's very, very neglected topic and it's interesting mechanistically. It has a clinical meaning, and hopefully we will touch some of these topics today. So I would like to start from maybe introducing the model that could be a foundation for this webinar. This is, let me just go to the next slide. So this is a concept of a distributed nociceptive system that was published some time ago by my former mentor, Robert Cockhill. And I think it's a really good starting point because we can build on this model other psychophysical findings and spatial aspects of pain. But we need to start a little bit on contemporary understanding of the nociceptive system. So according to this framework, um, we criticize, one can criticize a model of how the nociceptive information is processed in the nervous system. So we can somehow criticize this serial processing model, which is you can see here on the right side, because we know that very often when we try to interrupt this pathway somewhere here, maybe between C or B, or maybe higher or lower level, we know that very often pain comes back. Um, it's very difficult to treat. And the idea is to look at the nociceptive apparatus as a distributed system, as you can see here, which is with one of its features being a degenerated system. What does it mean? The degeneracy here is somehow like an analogy that comes from genetics. So let's say we know that amino acids are coded by triplets of nucleotides, for example, GGC or GGU. So you have the same amino acid that is represented differently. And maybe in the nociceptive system, we have something similar. So maybe one can have pain and it's very resilient to treatment because when we try to somehow interfere with the system, we try to change it, uh, other part of the nociceptive system is able to produce pain again and again and again. So I think that's a really interesting concept. Another one, which is somehow related to this model in the middle, relates to a population coding mechanism. So here, this concept relates to the questions how nociceptive system knows what's the intensity of injury, for example. What's the intensity of the stimulus that comes to the system and pose a threat? Well, according to this this model here, we are assuming that like in a nutshell, the more intense, more threatening event will engage a higher number of neurons. So for example, we can imagine here, let's say we have 5 different neurons, and all of them have their unique receptive fields. So for example, neuron number 3, which is here, have the center of the receptive field around the second digit. And we know that when we stimulate this digit, let's say with the very light tactile stimulus, we have a very high chance to see a high activation of this neuron. However, when we start increasing the intensity of the stimulus, let's say it's already noxious, we see that, and we will be stimulating exactly the same digit here. We know that there is some overlap. So at some point, you can see that adjacent neurons also will show an activity, or even more enhanced activity, like in this example below. So in this case, actually, the spatial distribution of activation of neurons will tell us something about the intensity of the threat that comes into the system. So we have here quite interesting foundation to see that nociceptive system is really distributed, and it engages a lot of structures processing the nociceptive input. And going to the maybe a second slide here, when we can see the relevance of that model, I really like this example here because it shows really the relevance. So Sugar and Bassi years ago reported this case, which I quite often show because I think it's really interesting. So they had a patient which could be used as an example of a resiliency of the nociceptive system. And the patient had post-herpetic neuralgia of the face and was not really like responsive, not getting better. So patient was treated sequentially with multiple neurosurgical procedures. Now, probably it was very common in 1951. And at the beginning, the first surgery that a physician performed was a total resection of the sensory root of the trigeminal nerve. So following some observation, patient didn't get better. So the surgeon decided, okay, well, so let's do the excision of the contralateral somatosensory cortex of the face. So they just removed the part of the brain, but the pain persisted. So then subsequently, they decided to remove the ipsilateral sensory cortex responsible for the face. So another surgery, and patient still felt pain. So in the very end of that story, surgeon decided to perform bilateral prefrontal lobotomy. So the brain was even more damaged. And the result of that surgery was patient said, well, I still have pain, but I am not really bothered by it anymore. So that's actually really, really interesting, a case that shows that when we try to look inside of the entire nervous system when one is in pain, in fact, many different structures will be engaged. That is the foundation. So yes, I think for the moment I will stop sharing the screen because we can start maybe from this point before we go into some psychophysical manifestations and this phenomena that we're going to talk about soon. Oh, I don't know if I can hear you, Victor.
Sorry, apologies. Yeah, thank you very much, Patsy, for this very nice introduction of the concept of distributed nociceptive system. I have one idea after having been listening to you, which is that we perhaps both in the research and the clinical context try to ascribe specific pain manifestations to single mechanisms, no?
Yes.
But what we are seeing after what you have explained is that perhaps several mechanisms produce several manifestations, no? I think this is a very powerful insight for clinicians also, because as you have said, when you try to address one single mechanisms, perhaps it is not enough to help the patient by reducing their pain. And I'm thinking, for example, in the mechanism of inflammation activating peripheral nerve ending, free nerve ending terminals. There are studies indicating that, yeah, inflammation is elevated in people with very specific distribution of pain, which is generalized pain. And other scientific studies say that, yeah, maybe it's not that important, no? Maybe the explanation is that, yeah, it might be important, but it doesn't explain everything.
Exactly. That what you said. Of course, there must be in many cases a peripheral drive, like an inflammation, like widespread inflammation that will naturally activate a system on the periphery. I 100% agree. There are cases like that, but we know also that when the localization of injury is really focused, it's relatively small. That it's the pain that is produced as a result of the stimulation or this particular injury. It's very often disproportional. And it is first is disproportional if we look at individual differences. The same injury will be perceived completely differently when we if we are ever be able to do that, to have a clinical injury like in a controlled fashion, like induced in people. I think everyone will perceive it slightly differently, and that relates to spatial distribution of pain as well, which we have like research from healthy volunteers and inducing pain. We know that this almost everyone perceive it differently. That would be my take home. And maybe this is another interesting point that actually, like one of the recent studies that we did, that was sort of actually a follow-up of this distributed nociceptive system framework, was to see at the phenomenon of pain radiation. So we know that when we what we found, it's a very old piece of the literature. It started like years ago on a group of 5 people. Donald Price observed that pain can radiate from the thermal stimulator, which is attached to the skin. So as far as I remember correctly, in this old study, very small area of the skin was stimulated. The temperature of the skin was controlled around the thermal stimulator. And as a result of stimulating with 49/51 degrees of Celsius, people reported irradiation of pain. So the area at which pain was felt was way bigger than the actual area that was stimulated, and was not covered but by the temperature changes occurring on the skin. I mean, perhaps some active cooling mechanisms taking place because the temperature is not really spreading, but it shows that the percept is spreading. And I think this is very, very interesting. So in this example, we can see this disproportion between the input and actually where the pain is.
Yeah, and I think this is the basic aspect of why, or perhaps the most important reason why pain distribution or investigating and studying pain distribution is so interesting, no? That this proportion between the stimulation and the perception in terms of space, of distribution.
Exactly.
Because it is, well, as you have said, a very old phenomenon, which has been called differently. It has acquired different names, as you have
Yes.
said. Pain radiation initially was also investigated under the term referred pain. But that's the main aspect, which is the disproportion between stimulation or the site of injury and the perception, yeah, and the distribution in terms of space, no? And another interesting aspect is that when you have talked about the distributed system, is that, well, in order for the system to maintain that proportion between the stimulation and the site of injury and the perception, what do you think? Do you think that it brings us valuable information regarding the capacity of the system to inhibit and maintain accuracy of the information that comes from the periphery?
That's I think you yes that's interesting point. So I mean it's a long path from we have like we probably agree there's a quite long path from what is happening on the periphery and where is the injury or whenever we stimulate our participants because like maybe I should have started from that. I am doing mainly experiments on healthy volunteers and we are trying to induce pain in healthy participants who are like willing to help our research projects, which is always challenging to find them. But yes, we are trying to do that so we have tools and methods that allow us to control the peripheral input. And it's very interesting, as I mentioned maybe earlier, that we have huge individual differences in pain. And perhaps actually that's a good moment. I will just go back a little bit because you mentioned the topic related to precision, and I think of encoding, and that maybe here I will briefly show something that will support my point of view. Yes, because exactly. So yeah, we'll just go back to the topic of precision and radiation slash referred pain. You can see here there are these lines that cross in the middle of the squares. So that very tiny, I don't know if you can really see that. I will try to find a laser stimulator. Oh, actually, I can do this. It's probably somewhere here. This is the very small area of the skin that we stimulated with the temperature of 49 degrees, as I mentioned, and you see how much the pain radiated from that area of the stimulation. So one can say it's not really precise. I am not really sure how much we can use this technique as a marker of precision of the nociceptive system. We can talk about this in a second, but it's interesting the comparison which is on the right side because when we display it on the skin area, the square, it's a light object exactly like this. You can see that there is no radiation. And each of these colorful squares is a rating of participants who saw that square that was displayed on the skin. So when we collapse them together, we see this heat map, and obviously, because people are so accurate, they are doing this task almost the same way across individuals. Everyone does this the same, and I think that this is very nice analogy here between like how vision is processed in the nervous system and how nociception is processed and pain, because we see that here is something completely different. In the middle, we just display them a bigger square of light or smaller, like way bigger square of light to see if people can really detect it. And obviously they can, but that shows a really interesting differences. And one can ask question like, okay, so why it's like that in the visual system we see things the same way and nociception all everything is there is so much variability, so it's actually hard to answer. I used to give the example that we can, if we assume that there is a very small um, percent of of humans who have problems with color detection, we can assume that most of the people will like stop on the red light. If we, of course, create some fictitious scenario and there's just one bulb and you can really distinguish it, people will really stop. Why is that? Perhaps because the information that we put into the system about the visual information are happening instantly since we open our eyes until we go to bed and fall asleep. And with pain, everyone has the number of the events and experiences that we have in the past is completely different. Like it's so much diversity there, and one threatening event, injury, can completely change our future experiences. And I think that's a really good, maybe point to also refer to your work, because as far as I remember, you had this really interesting study about people who had like a fracture of the humerus in the past, and I think
Yeah.
they were somehow more. Um, Maybe you can briefly elaborate
Yeah,
on that.
yeah. There are some studies that we did and also that were conducted by other people in which we assessed the capacity to induce referred pain in those with a recent or past history of uh, painful injury, as you have
Mhm.
said, fracture or ankle sprain. We replicated the model with, we started with a fracture of the proximal humerus, but also we subsequently replicated the model with a fracture of the distal radius. No, and what we observed was that despite that the subjects were pain-free at the moment of the study, they showed a tendency to experience more expanded pain areas when they were poked with a pressure stimulus. No,
Mhm, mhm.
and this is interesting because it allow us to speculate about the underlying mechanisms. Because of course, when we just assess pain manifestations, or when we use psychophysics, we cannot at the same time investigate or go deep into neural mechanisms. No, it is just the manifestation. So we have to speculate, and yeah, we have to think about the mechanisms that might be behind these manifestations we observed. It might either be the peripheral nociceptor that might have been primed in the moment of injury and has remained like primed or more prone to be activated in the future despite the absence of pain. And also, of course, central mechanisms, no, which are very interesting, such as, for example, changes in the neural architecture of the dorsal horn. Perhaps a very strong stimuli that was there in the past has changed in the long term the neural architecture of the sensory system in the dorsal horn, no? And of course, mechanisms in the brain or other non neurophysiological or purely neurophysiological mechanisms such as memory or the memory of the previous pain or the
Mhm.
conditioning perhaps, which is something that you have investigated, no? So
Yes.
maybe I've been very interestingly reading your last publication in pain, which has been shared on the chat by my
Oh,
colleagues.
thank you.
Maybe you can comment us a little bit about these other mechanisms such as conditioning and its relation with pain distribution.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for actually pointing to this, because I mean everything here is really related, and I hope that we may be able to somehow like summarize it in the end. Because we have this framework. Now we talk about like pain radiation. Actually, we have refer pain. We don't really know what difference this different
Hmm.
phenomena. Maybe there is a substantial overlap. But now we talk about precision, then actually you showed in your study that the previous experiences shapes future responses. And actually what we did, we really used your work. I hopefully, probably you have seen that, because uh, for me, it was as an indirect evidence. I mean, sort of indirect evidence. One can argue that not very strong. And the entire concept of pain conditioning is, I think, no, one can say to some extent um, controversial, but I think there's especially in the fields of placebo and nocebo studies, we see that pain intensity can be modulated by conditioned stimuli. So one can say, okay, so if this is possible, why pain distribution cannot be to some degree a conditioned response? Perhaps yes, one can say. And yeah, we actually were inspired by your findings. I can maybe share another slide here for a moment. The study was pretty complex, but I will do my best to go briefly through the design. But in general, we think that uh, this is the beginning, and we have an injury. We know that the injury happens in the three-dimensional space. So one has a ligament interruption or an ankle sprain, and it's not always like 3 square centimeters of injury. It happens, it's a three-dimensional thing. So in fact, when we look at what is happening, nociception comes from different areas.
Sorry, Vatsi, I think you've been muted for a reason.
All right.
Okay.
Is
Yep.
it okay now?
Yeah, it's been just 2 seconds.
Okay, 2 seconds, no problem. So just I will just back to the theory. So the theory is that we have an injury. The nociception from different sides can somehow be coupled. Like one area of the nociception um, is associated with the other area. So the idea is that after some time during the injury and the healing, there is this coupling. And at some point, maybe one part of the injury is already healed, but then the other one is still happening and works as a conditioning stimulus for the other area. So in fact, when we look objectively, there is no nociception anymore, but still pain is perceived in that area. It's because like a one pain serves as a conditioning stimulus for another, as a conditioning stimulus for another unconditioning stimulus. So like two pain can somehow like link together. That was the idea here. However, because it hasn't been done earlier, we thought that maybe we'll start from a simple experiment in which we take a lot of methodology and insights from nocebo field of research and behavioral psychology. So we decided to just use a visual cues as a conditioning stimuli. So what happened here? People were conditioned, so they were either they saw a blue color on the screen, and then we stimulated them with two electrodes of nociceptive stimulation, and they were asked to rate the size of the pain on the screen. So primary outcome here was the distribution. And in the green condition, we just activated one electrode, and we expected that the distribution will be smaller in the green condition compared to the blue condition. And this obviously happened because when you look at this data here, this is learning phase trial by trial. You can see that in the blue condition, people clearly felt a greater distribution of pain, and in the green one, they felt clearly less distribution of pain. So learning phase was happening successfully. And then in the testing phase, which sort of was here extinction phase to serve as an extinction, we stimulated only with one electrode, and we still displayed blue color and green color, and we also introduced a novel stimulus that was not previously shown as a way to test generalization effects. We didn't find much generalization, so that's a small spoiler. However, You can see here, that's very important. It's trial 31. When you see this gap between these two trials, you can see this is a significant conditioning effect. So despite we stimulated only with one electrode, people still felt bigger distribution of pain in the blue condition. And when we tell them on the beginning that the color will have meaning, so we gave them sort of suggestion, this effect was even more robust because you see here that greater space between the trials. So I would say this is somehow relevant to your findings of for me, because of course in your experiment with people who had a heel fractured and then when you challenge the nociceptive system in these patients by I think you had a mechanical stimulation, they had more spread of pain. So of course there are many different explanations, but like for me I can say, well, but maybe actually what happened is that nociceptive stimulus that was in your case a mechanical stimulus just was a conditioning stimulus that trigger learned responses from the past. And I think this somehow of course one can say the methodology is completely different. I agree. um, but what we are doing now is a study in which in which we try. I will just stop sharing the screen for a moment. We are trying to uh, really couple different pains with each other. So it's not like that we have a visual cue that is coupled with bigger pain or different one with smaller pain. We are just literally try to couple one pain with the other, and we just try to see what happens. So I will have some preliminary results in EFIC in Lyon. So perhaps if some of our participants are
But
coming.
but but see, I think that you have just done a very difficult exercise, which is to explain very, very well, very complete methods that you used in this study, and has finally given a hypothesis that you have, which is super interesting. You have just used a very few seconds to share your hypothesis with us, but I think it is it is it is great, which is a very novel idea. Let me rephrase you to know if I have got it in the right way,
Yes,
and if I didn't, just correct me. No,
yes,
so everything that happens around one pain at a given time
yes,
might be conditioned, no, and in future occasions, despite the original pain or the unconditioned stimulus is no longer present, the conditioned stimulus might elicit the original response, the original pain.
right.
Am I right?
Yes,
So, and specifically, you have been talking about one pain being conditioned by another pain.
right.
Not, you haven't mentioned any other type of stimuli, no? Just
No.
pain conditioning another type of pain. Well, and so that in future occasions, if the second condition pain is elicited, then the original pain is elicited again.
Exactly. That would be the logic here. And again, I mean, I have to really be careful because I don't want to make strong claims because this is a basic science experiment on healthy people, and we really try to model things in the lab and make some assumptions if this is really possible. But definitely more work has to be done here. So. But that would be hypothesis. And maybe just to emphasize, this may be a good moment because I remember there is a chunk of literature of studies in which they try somehow to induce pain by innocuous stimulation. This is slightly different concept, I would say. Here we are not trying to induce pain from like innocuous stimulus. We are just trying to see if one pain can make the other one being bigger or smaller. This is what I want to say. It's more about like a modulation and not really about evoking a pain, because I
Mhm.
think it has to be, uh, it can be very difficult. I think evidence so far are quite conflicting in terms of if we can induce pain by by actual visual stimulus, for example. I would say it's
Mhm.
not possible, but maybe future research will show it. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, and it's important that you remark that in order to investigate these new mechanisms, it's important to do it in healthy people, no?
Yes,
And
yes.
then translate that findings into perhaps animals or patients doing backward forward translation, no?
But if I'm just a shower thought now, I'm just listening to you, also thinking, it of course it can have also it could have some clinical relevance. I'm just because if it really works, if it can really work that everything can be conditioned, one can say that maybe a kinesiotaping actually work because you attach it to the painful area, and then this like stimulated skin nociceptors, the visual stimulation is coupled with pain, and then you suddenly interrupt like remove the kinesiotape. Maybe actually what happens is that you somehow affect the because of the conditioned responses, you affect the pain distribution. I don't know. I'm
Yeah, but
speculating here a little bit because I'm trying to find a little bit of relevance, but who knows?
yeah, but as long as we point these arguments as hypotheses, it's totally okay. And I think it's a very, very interesting exercise and definitely food for thought. So, by extension, perhaps just telling the patient you have improved a lot and showing objective information that confirms that the patient is better and that you can stop passive treatment or whatever. The
Yeah,
patient attending the clinic might also be a healing or pain
yeah,
reducing mechanism, no?
exactly.
That's,
I didn't want to sound like a person who is a kinetic
yeah.
advocate. Okay, that was just, just an example of what can happen.
As I said before, as long as we just remark that these hypothesis is totally okay. But of course, they are uh, based on studies and they don't come out of nothing. Of
Yes.
course, very good.
Um,
And yeah,
Yeah, it just another topic which, because if we are in this field of spatial aspects of pain, I think it's very important to say about spatial summation, because
Mhm.
also this is something that very often is just ignored. And I don't
Can,
know.
can can you define what is spatial summation of pain for those who are less familiarized with these concepts?
Of course, yes. So spatial summation is as pain is a effect where we stimulate with nociceptive, or let's say we take a very high temperature, and if we stimulate small area of the skin, we have like one pain, but when we increase the area of the stimulation to induce pain, we will have a bigger pain. So in the regular normal life situation, let's imagine that you are in the because I know university, you are gonna grab a coffee from the coffee device, which is malfunctioning and it gives you a lot of like hot water up to the top of the cup, and you are trying to move this cup from one spot to the other. What you automatically do first, well, you try to grab the cap normally with your hand, but it's going to be very painful. So you then reduce the contact with the heat object. You probably heat it just on the top of the cap to move it. Why you're doing this? Because you're reducing spatial summation of pain, because you're reducing the area of the contact with the source, and then intensity of pain decreases. That's the foundation. However, and then if we take this effect to the clinic, um, we can say that those individuals who have more widespread nociception, like as you said, for example, maybe the inflammation is more widespread. We can say that in this, you can predict that these individuals have a more intense pain, so they'll suffer more. But at the same time, we can say there was one study I remember done by Ronald Stout. I can't remember 2006 or 2007, but they found weak but significant correlation between intensity of pain and the number of painful locations in the body. So this is also clinically relevant, in my opinion. And again, I really want to emphasize that not everything what we can do, maybe as a clinicians, it's about like reducing pain intensity per se. Maybe there are other pathways to treat pain, and maybe we can somehow think about shrinking the area which is painful. Because this is something that many people not often, like I would say, think about, is that if you have a pain which is a result of multiple nociceptive sources, that could be a cancer pain, and some of the areas simply cannot be exposed to the treatment surgery because it will be related to maybe it will pose a threat to life because it is in the surrounding on the very important like life organs, for example. So maybe we can then think about trying to scoop that pain from different areas because in the end we can reduce the total suffering or total intensity of pain. I'm just trying to decompose it. I know that this is not that simple, and there are many other variables. I have to acknowledge that, but this is the way of thinking. To not really think about, okay, let's put some inhibitory drugs and then all of the system will shut down. Boo! Because we know that there are so many side effects. We have other issues like addiction, um, even opioids. I think they can, there's even opioids can cause long-term sensitization, as far as I can say.
Yeah.
So maybe there are different ways, is what I want to say.
Yeah, this is very interesting and important thing to reflect about because what epidemiological studies show is that the more spread the pain, the more disease burden it has,
Mhm.
and more disability, and more risk for long-term sick leave,
Mhm.
and more comorbidities, and less and poorer general health. No, so definitely, the more expanded the pain, the worse. Is
Yes.
it's a bad marker if pain expands, and of course, if the area of pain shrinks or reduces, it is a good. We can say with the current data that it is a good sign, definitely a good symptom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, exactly. What is very interesting in the spatial summation also, which I think is worth to mention, which we talk about in another occasion, is that interestingly, uh, okay, so we can induce spatial summation not only with the coffee cup, but we can do it in the lab. So we carefully increase the area of the stimulation. And what happens is that pain increases, but it doesn't increases that much as we would expect it to increase. It's just a little bit of more pain, a little bit of more pain. And there is a study, one of my favorite, from Serge Marchand and Arsenault. They expose people to, I think, was immersion of the part of the limb in the cold or hot water tank. I can't remember if it's cold or hot. Doesn't matter. It was really painful. So let's say they start from small area of the hand, and they went up to the wrist, and then they go up to the elbow, and then they induce the entire arm. So one can assume, well, if you increase the area of the stimulation that much, the intensity of pain reported by people in the full hand immersion had to be excruciating. But in fact, it was not. And then they found out that when they started from a really big area, which is the full hand, and then they decrease it, the trajectory of pain was completely different when they start from the small area. Well, you can imagine, again, starting from the fingers going to the app, pain increased quite like steeply. But when you start from the big area, total amount of pain was lower because apparently uh, stimulating an entire limb was related to such a strong activation of pain inhibitory mechanisms that it affect all of the other subsequent immersions. So people in the end, they had less pain. So this is also interesting to think about, that maybe the summation is not that bad because it shows us how efficient the pain inhibition is in our nervous system. So I wanted to just emphasize it because I think it's really, really fascinating. It was a study by, I think, another study on rats where they look at a spinal cord projecting neurons. In one group of rats, they interrupt the connection of the spinal with the spinal cord with the brain, and the other group they didn't. And in those in which the spinal cord was interrupted, when they increased the area of the stimulation in rat, these neurons in the spinal cord really increased their activity. There was like, it's very nice in the paper I can send later. It really nicely showed that the intensity of this activity of neurons increased, but in those who had the intact spinal cord, the neurons were inhibited when you started increasing the area of the stimulation. So that's a really nice translational finding, and sort of alternative to maybe participants. Some of participants know it, a conditioning pain modulation, which is quite confusing, but it's about
I think that you don't like this label or this name very much.
Oh, no, we can talk about it for another 20 minutes, like why it's like uncomfortable for me. But yes, this is another reason which is worth to talk about spatial summation, because it's a different metric, it's a different area of research. It's quite neglected now, was very popular 20 years ago, and now suddenly like it went to the bench, and I don't know why. So hype.
Yeah. Very good. And yeah. So I have so many questions that I could make at this moment, and as you have said, we could be long time talking about this. So now you have mentioned the condition pain modulation, and how do you think it relates with pain distribution? Because there are some studies out there that have been conducted in both the spinal system and also in the trigeminal system, in which by activating or hoping to activate the endogenous analgesia or the descending inhibitory system, the capacity to induce referred pain or expansion of pain in another area of the body is reduced. So, which make us to think that, this descending control not only controls for the intensity of pain, which is what many studies have investigated, is been the main metric, but also controls for the distribution. No? And perhaps it has something to do with how this descending system keep this complex architecture of the dorsal horn inhibited, most of it, no? And just leaving very certain pathways activated in the nociceptive system. What do you think about this? Which I guess is very complex, of course, but what comes to your mind?
Yeah. I think it's very, very complex. I'm just trying to recall. Do you mean the studies in which, let's say, one pain in one area of the body was able to inhibit or actually shrunk the size of pain on the other part of the body?
I can briefly summarize one study. I think it
Yeah.
was published in European Union of Pain in 2021,
Mhm.
in which we induced referred pain in healthy volunteers by poking the infraspinatus muscle, and we
Mhm.
recorded the areas of referred pain or pain distribution in general in the first session. And 24 hours later, we tried to induce pain with the same intensity in the same individuals with the exact same conditions, but in this case, at the same time, we apply also a conditioning pain. No? So we apply painful stimuli in a very distant body area, which was the leg. And what we observed, I will have to remember the numbers exactly, which is something I cannot do right now. But in brief, what we observed was that our capacity to induce referred pain in the same individuals was reduced by applying a painful stimuli at the same time. And it was not because of the repetition, because we have observed in different studies that referred pain in the same conditions can be consistently induced in the same individual. So it seems there are many studies that have shown that if you use same type of stimuli with the same intensity in the same individual, and you repeat it over days, the pattern tends to be very, very similar among days.
That's really, really interesting.
So it seems, I think it has also been shown by Fernando Exposto in the trigeminal system. They stimulated the masseter muscle by pressure stimulation, by painful pressure stimulation, and they observed that there was like tendency to have almost the same areas of referred pain to the same sites in the same individuals. Okay. Yeah. And so this is one consistent result we have observed, so that we can say that if the main difference between two sessions was the conditioning pain, so the conditioning stimulus, and the referred pain changes, it was because the activation of the descending system was somehow controlling the pain distribution. I don't know if I have explained myself properly, but let me know if you have got it, if it is understood or not.
Well, but like what you would say, what you would like how maybe the thing to ask you a follow-up question is how you would link that stability of responses with the mechanism of inhibition.
Oh, I have mentioned this stability of the referred pain pattern just as an additional data, no? As an additional result to indicate that the difference we observe in the study that I have explained, in which we induce referred pain in one session and 24 hours later we try to induce the same referred pain pattern, but at the same time we apply the conditioning stimuli, and we observe a much reduced capacity to induce referred pain. So that the change is not explained just by the variability
of
the referred pain response, because we have observed in several studies that the pain induction is quite stable in terms of distribution.
But you see that this is actually super like a niche area of research, and I think everyone heard in our field that one pain can inhibit the other one, but about like shrinking the size of pain, it's not really something people think about. I think it's very neglected, in my opinion.
It's interesting. Of course, it is challenging to investigate this without biases and with enough sample, etc. But I also agree that it is of course interesting. Well, we have touched so many aspects. I don't know if you feel like there is any topic we haven't talked about.
Well, I mean, I really would like to ask you a question, if we have a minute, maybe. What are your thoughts about, in general, a distribution of pain? Is distribution of pain a good thing to have or a bad thing to have?
A certain distribution, or
yeah, let's say because we can look at the distribution of pain, let's say, of the injury, of the induced pain. And then we talk about variability, that some people will have like a massive spread of pain and some of them will have like a really small contained area. The question is, do humans need the spread of pain, or it's actually not needed? Maybe.
So you're making a question touching the evolutionary perspective, maybe, or
yeah.
I'll make the question to you also, but I think well, when I think about this topic, this is just opinion or insights. Now we are not talking about specific research findings. Okay, now we get into the to the opinion. So no, but Yeah, perhaps I think that, yeah, the sensory system has limited resources, no? And perhaps we cannot have a very accurate representation of the entire body. So we need, for example, if we have visceral pain, it is very well known since many decades ago that viscera, when they have problems or medical conditions, they are symptoms are expressed in the musculoskeletal system or in the skin or in complete different areas in a very diffuse manner, no? So I think that one response is, well, the body tries to save energy so that
Yeah.
keeping one signal very accurate in the sensory nervous system is costly. So perhaps just a very diffuse symptoms is something that is easy for the system, that doesn't require a lot of energy. And yeah, and then it allows also the nervous system to prioritize accuracy in other parts of the body, such as the hands or the face in the trigeminal system or other vital parts of the body in which we need a lot of precision. No?
Exactly.
So what do you think?
Well, I mean, I agree with what you just said. So uh, there is a probably function of many different factors like body location, proximity to the central part of the body, um, and that for me, what is important is mm, maybe like attentional component. I think um, it's not only about feeling pain, which is 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. Is more about if we really are bothered by the sensation, I will do something about it. And I think we chatted about this, right? That you can have super efficient system, no pain spread at all, and maybe you have a serious cardiac problem that will be not detected. So maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, if you have a pain which is a very small area, you will not really bother by that, even though it's intense. But when affects half of your body, maybe then you will do something.
Yeah, which is also the paradigm of temporal summation of pain. No, if you repeat the exact same stimulus in one specific body area, the intensity, despite you keep the same intensity of the stimulus, the intensity of the perceived pain increases more and more and more. No,
Yes.
and it happens even in a stronger way in those patients with chronic pain. No, which has been investigated since many years ago. I think that's also from the evolutionary perspective, this is important for the
Yes,
individual to take an action,
exactly.
no?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like the body saying, hey, pay attention to this because
yeah.
it might
Yeah,
cause
sure.
a lot
Makes
of
sense.
harm. Makes sense. Exactly.
Biology very often makes sense.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if we have questions from the audience. We have one here, which is saying that in your last paper,
Hmm?
on classical conditioning, did you consider inducing mental fatigue, such as the Stroop test?
Mental fatigue, such as a Stroop test. Interesting question. Well, not really consider that, to be honest. Um, but maybe this could play a role in the efficiency of conditioning for sure. Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't think about it, but mm, there are a number of factors that will affect the successful conditioning here. Um, we are well, if we there's always a trade-off in this conditioning studies because how much trials are needed to induce the effect that you're assuming to induce. So if
Mhm.
you go too much, you probably can habituate people too much, and then you won't be able to see effects. If it's too much predictable, that also can be the case. And also the difference between conditioning and testing phase, I think that's a critical moment, because if this difference between what people experience before and what they experience during testing, if this difference is too big, the learning will start happening again. So you won't be able to detect the learning effects because the prediction error is very high. So I think that's the challenge, how to also design these experiments. But whether a mental fatigue, yeah, I think that could be a moderator here. It's worth looking at in the next study. So thank you.
We write it down and we'll consider it for future research. Very good. I think Patsy, time is up. I ask you to be here 1 hour. I don't want to take more of your time. I think it's been very productive and very, very interesting. Definitely food for thought, not only for researchers. I hope that it has also been food for thought for clinicians. Thank you very much for having accepted.
Of course.
Now,
Thank you for inviting me, having me, and it's a great chance to talk about something different than CPM. Sorry.
definitely. So what I'm going to do is now please ask you to fill the survey of this webinar. I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm gonna leave this QR code that you can use to access the satisfaction survey. Okay? I don't know if you can see my screen or not. Let's see. I think that now you can. So thank you very much and see you in the next webinar, which will take place the 8th of May. So bye-bye, Patsy.
Bye-bye, Victor. Thank you so much for organizing this. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.